Hello, social workers, mental health professionals, and change agents. Welcome to another episode of season 6 of the Social Work Rants podcast. Saludos a todos. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. Make sure you continue to follow the podcast on all social media platforms. Don't be scared by these moguls messing up the platforms. So follow the podcast on Instagram at the Social Work Rants Podcast. That is all one word. On Twitter at Social Work Rants, and on Facebook, type in the Social Work Rants Podcast. Hit the like button. Also, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Rate the podcast on any audio platform. I appreciate the love and support. Gracias a todos, todo el mundo por su apoyo. As we record this episode is like the end of February, so this will be released the first weekend of Social Work Month in March. So by the time you hear this episode, happy Social Work Month to all my fellow social workers. Thank you for all that you do, the unsung heroes of our communities, and that's no shade to any other helping profession out there, but we do way more than anybody give us credit for. So, shout out to you. Thank you for all that you do, everybody. Whether private practice, you name it, we do it. So shout out to you guys. I appreciate you. Um, this episode is proudly brought to you by Her Technologies Incorporated, the whoop whoop, the sponsor of the podcast. Yeah, yes, you heard it, folks. I'm trying to blow up little by little. I got a sponsorship, completed one of my goals in 2023, and it is a perfect time because it's tax season. So I literally just did my taxes this week. So it's tax season in America. And HERD is the financial back office for mental health professionals. On average, they save therapists more than 60 hours per year in financial record keeping and $5,000 in taxes. And who doesn't want to save time so you could see your clients, do your progress notes, or get money back and save money with your taxes? If you're a social worker in private practice, HERD will take care of all your accounting needs, including bookkeeping, taxes, and payroll. They will also support your business throughout the year to make sure you are maximizing deductions, and deductions are very important, especially I got a big smile on my face did my taxes thanks to all the deductions. For more information, go to joinher.com for more information. And speaking of HERD, we have a very special guest, the CEO of HERD Technologies Incorporated, Andrew Risen. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. And to every one of the social workers on this call, happy social work month. The best clinician that I've ever worked with was an LCSW, and I am deeply grateful for the work that we did together. So thank you to everybody that's listening.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. So the purpose, like I said, it is tax season in America, and taxes has almost become kind of politicalized as well, thanks to a certain former president that we shall not name, and everybody else kind of like celebrities that you see like committing fraud with their taxes. So we don't want to do that with
No.
brand new private practices that we're opening up and proudly opening up or have for a while. Who are full-time entrepreneurs or have a side hustle in private practice, got a couple clients, and the importance of payroll and taxes and all that good stuff. Making sure if you have a private practice with more than one person, you pay them on time and that they don't quit on you. So kind of like Andrew, let people know like what obviously your role as a CEO and what does that entail, and just a little more background of HERD.
Yeah, for sure. So a little bit of background on Herd, and I can provide kind of a little bit of context on my journey and then also how we help folks. So um in 2016, I was working at PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is a very, very large, what's called a public accounting firm. So it's kind of like a training ground for a lot of the accounting and finance professionals that are out there in the world. And so I was at PwC building a tax software startup at that point in time, and had started my career kind of on the technical accounting side of things, helping small to medium sized businesses manage their accounting and work through things like taxes and all of the hairy things that folks don't want to work through. And for an extended period of time, I had a deep passion about the mental health space. My wife's a clinician. My sister-in-law is getting her clinical social work degree, and I've dealt with anxiety and depression and SI since I was a little kid, and so have spent about 2+ decades in the therapy office as well. And so I had started doing a bunch of research in the mental health space, and through the experiences of having a partner that's a clinician, and by proxy, many of my best friends have become clinicians as well. Just seeing the challenges firsthand of moving into private practice, understanding how to set up a new business entity, understanding how to track your income and expenses, understanding how to pay quarterly taxes, understanding how to do what you did yesterday and set yourself up for success during tax season, and put yourself in a good place, not just as a clinician, but as a small business owner. And I think that's oftentimes one of the scarier parts of moving into private practice is, oh, wow, I'm not only managing the client side of my practice and have the progress notes like Michael always jokes about,
Yes.
but I also have this whole other human that I have to be and I have to figure out on my own. And that's becoming an entrepreneur. That's becoming a small business owner. And that's why, the work that you're doing is so cool as well. And in surfacing this type of content to these professionals. So it was an opportunity for us to support them in the back office in a way that they hadn't been able to effectively before, in a consolidated manner, and also at just a cost and a price that is more effective and makes sense for them. So that was kind of the genesis of her. There was a couple different pivots earlier on in our journey, but that was kind of what led to where we are.
Yeah, and that's important too, because even like with my business, I already have pivoted a couple of different times, and I haven't even like now like starting to make a little bit of money, but I already know I'm like are still at a loss, but like
Yeah.
kind of like just pivoting and kind of like initially like my business was like maybe focus because I moved from New York to Delaware, kind of maybe focus on just like a Delaware small business, and then like
Yeah.
we kind of just make now became more just online business like for anybody, and it's like okay, now I'm kind of thinking maybe just already maybe doing a whole other new pivot to something else. So it's like always there's always something, and it's for myself having a full-time job and like really like okay, by the time I get home and it's like I'm tired, kind of like work on the business, and it's like weekends come and there's always something happening. So by the time like you already like it's hard like everybody on IG makes things like so easy and beautiful, and it's like it's really not. You really have to make time and commitment, and it's just a lot of work.
Yeah, 100%. I think the feedback that I or the lesson that I learned from one of my mentors, Linda, really early on in my career when I started building this tax software startup that I was building before her, is customer feedback is the only currency of credibility. And so through all of the pivots that we've been through, the one thing that's always been critical to us and mattered to us is supporting clinicians in private practice. And so we tried to do a lot of different things that weren't the right business, that were really bad businesses that kind of supported clinicians, but not in the way that we had hoped to make an impact. And I think when you always keep the customer that you're looking to serve, so whether it's clinical social workers or social
Mhm.
workers in your eyes, or in our eyes, clinicians as a whole, and listen to them and spend time with them and do research with them and build in partnership with them, I always feel like that ultimate path and ultimate North Star is going to shape itself out as long as you're doing that work together.
No, 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 it's extremely important, and it is really just like from coming out with a name and like trademarking, all that costs money if you use a startup, and like you don't have the money unless you like put the money up front yourself, and it's like and then kind of, the tax when taxes come and you kind of like got to get all your documents together, and if you don't have like softwares and it's like, you know, TurboTax and all this other stuff come into play. You see all these commercials for all these commercials, or like for New York is like like Liberty Tax and all these other
Yep.
companies that kind of like come through like during tax season, and
Yep.
then and it's like, where do you go? What do you, is like, can be overwhelming at times.
Yeah, 100%. I think, yeah, for clinicians for sure. And I mean, I saw it with my partner as well, but like there's so many different tools and service professionals and services out there that you can use. And oftentimes it's trying to piecemeal all of those different things together. But I think for clinicians that are getting, set up in their practice and, thinking about building the structures and what's going to be most helpful and effective for them, like, um, whether you want to use a, full service experience like Herd, where we handle a lot of that work and consolidate it into one place, or tackle it yourself, there's lots of different ways that you can do it. And I think, especially early on, just there are some best practices and um, getting a tax ID, whether you decide that you want to be a sole proprietor or whether you want to set up an LLC and become an S corp, getting a separate tax ID enables you to get a business bank account that's separate from your personal bank account, and that's a great first step in separating your business income and your business expenses, so then you're able to take a different look and a different view into it, right? And whether it's keeping track of the income and expenses in the spreadsheet, which is oftentimes a great starting place when you're moving into private practice in those first couple months, or getting that separate business bank account and connecting it to a software like Herd or TurboTax or QuickBooks or Wave or anything like that to manage your accounting. There are just some best practices that you can put in place to wrap your head around kind of the income and expenses that you have in your practice and set yourself up for more success when it becomes comes to tax season and tax filing as well.
So for what would be the difference between Herd and say like doing stuff on QuickBooks or any other software like that? Does Herd make things more easier compared to
Yeah.
QuickBooks or something like that?
Yeah. So what Herd has done effectively as a company is we've brought the bookkeeping piece. So part of that experience that you have from QuickBooks, we've brought payroll for the folks that are S corps or group practice owners that have to pay contractors or W-2 employees, and also the quarterly tax filing and the annual tax filing experience into one place. And so we've built the software and tailored all of the content and the product experience to support clinicians and make it as simple and easy and straightforward as possible. But then you're also paired on the other side with a support team that has extensive experience in filing returns for small business owners and also specifically clinicians as well. And so we have the subject matter expertise that we're supporting you with on the back end. So when questions come up throughout the year, like, is this deductible? Or how do I think about taking this next step in my practice? You have a team of folks that are there to support you on top of just having that software and trying to DIY it yourself. So it's bringing that software and the people experience together to really support folks.
Oh, no, that's very interesting. Now, for somebody in private practice, what are a couple of examples that could be tax deductible? Somebody who hasn't done their taxes yet, or they gonna wait till the last day, or already like, I need to file an extension already. Like, like what can people do to, like, what are some deductions from a social work private practice perspective?
Yeah, great question. And also, I have not filed my tax return yet, nor have many of the people around me. So that's totally fine. No stress on getting through that tax return quickly. If we think about some of the deductions that are really common for clinicians, you can think through things like your practice management software. So things like Simple Practice and Therapy Notes. If you use Zoom, if you use something like Hushmail or, HIPAA compliant email services, continuing education. So as a clinician, you have, X number of, continuing education hours you need to get on a monthly or on an annual basis or biannual for some licenses. professional development. So a lot of the folks that we work with are constantly investing in coaching programs and different ways to level up their skill set and their licensure type and the modalities in which they approach their work as well. And oftentimes these are bigger expenses. And so those are great things to take advantage of. A couple other things to think about are things like the home office expense, which is ultra relevant for all of the folks operating in private practice these days. Most folks are
Yes.
operating from their home office. And so there's a couple different approaches that you can take, but largely you'll look at that total percentage of your household that you're existing in your home office and apportion those expenses accordingly. And so you think through things like rent and utilities. So things like electricity, gas, water, all of the things associated with your home office or your home space, and then apportioning that or attributing that to your home office. Other things are like indirect expenses. So if you're working at home, you have internet and you have a phone that you're probably now using for both work and personal and not separating like you used to before. And so getting a good sense of what is the percentage that you've used for work and what is the percentage that you've used for personal. Um, there's a number of other potential deductions, but I'll make sure that your audience as well gets a list of all of those deductions and we can share that after the fact as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And always contact your CPA and I know there's a whole bunch of CPAs out there and sometimes it's good to pay more to get a better experience because I've had CPAs that I got a good return, and then I got a letter from my IRS. I was like, you actually owe this money. So it's like I've had that experience, and we as small business owners and clinicians, like we already struggling with like our student loans not being forgiven, and September is gonna come up real quick, and
Come on,
unless
Biden.
there's actually by the time this recording airs, there's a big rally that's happening in DC outside the Supreme Court. So it's like hopefully something something happens regarding these student loans because we could put more money into our businesses and just or just like anything or just save like recession is happening, inflation, and it's like or go on however you want to spend your money. We need that extra money forced out. So that's a whole other topic. I've said my two my my 2 cents about student loans, and I continue to fight the good fight about them loans and forgiveness. So um going back to to the tax piece, you gave a lot of great points. What can be deducted, and people don't realize like it's always just good to ask. Like if you have a good CPA, like I know I did. Like I had questions because I want to make sure I didn't want to hear nothing from the IRS. I was like, let me make this phone call or send an email out. Like, hey, like I had this question, like, or if you see something on Instagram and like kind of like let me just ask my CPA. Like I trust my CPA, and the CPA is always available. It's like, hey, I saw this. Is this true or like, what's this new scheme that, that people are doing? Is this legit or like or partially legit? Like, what exactly is going on? Like, it's because ever since even maybe before COVID, but really COVID, when we all locked down, there was just a wealth of information. It became like really overwhelming, and there's people's like kind of like all over the place, and people are still struggling with businesses, or people started businesses as a result of COVID, or afterwards, like or had the idea, right? All right, this is it. I'm going to do it right now. So it's kind of uh, just a lot of information overload, and I don't know what is your sense, having from multiple lenses that you see.
Yeah, that's a scary one. There is a lot of information out there, and a lot of it's true and helpful, but a lot of it is misinformation around what is deductible or what isn't. And the worst thing that I have seen happen is people make financial decisions based on information that they saw and trusted. that came back to, bite them in the butt after filing their return. But the big recommendation that I'd make around this is like, separating your business and personal expenses is really helpful because the thing that it allows you to do is write off all of the things or expense all of the things through your business account that you perceive or feel intuitively to be business expenses. And once you are able to centralize all of that information, it makes it a heck of a lot easier for you to take advantage of those deductions or write-offs at the end of the year when you do have that conversation with your accounting professional. Because then I can come to you at the end of the year and say, hey, I've spent all of this money on X, Y, and Z, and there are these things like travel expenses, or I got a personal vehicle that I'm writing off through my business, or I bought a bunch of furniture for my office. Like, is this a write-off? Is it not a write-off? And so there's this concept, and it's kind of makes everything gray and murky in the world of the IRS, but of ordinary and necessary when it comes to business expenses, which can create a pretty gray line, as as you alluded to at the beginning of the podcast. There are folks that have stretched that line a little further than perhaps they should have, and obviously systemic issues around that. But that's a conversation for us later on. But take advantage of all of the expenses that you can through your business account. And what an accountant will do, if you came to me, I would say, hey, you can write this off, not going to be able to write that off. You can write this off, not going to be able to write that off, but get all of that information into one place, because the one place that you don't want to put yourself in at the end of the year is like, scrambling through your drawer, trying to find the receipts from that one expense that you had on January 19th, of last year. And so get everything into one place, consolidate it through it, whether it's a personal checking account that's separate for your sole proprietorship, or you have a formal business entity set up and you have a separate business account set up. Run it all through one place and centralize that information. And that's just going to make it a heck of a lot easier when it comes to tax time for you.
No, that's good info, and even for myself, like still struggle with that from time to time,
It's
and
hard.
it is hard, especially I see that a lot of business credit. I want to talk about that real quick in terms of that's, well, number one, doesn't get talked about at all, like in social work school, in terms of like ways to obtain, whether business loans or personal credit cards, or ways to go about, and how personal credit actually, you got to have good credit to even like try to attain business credit. So obviously that kind of plays back to the student loans, and like student loans might be affecting somebody's credit. So between that, but once you have like, you're in a good place and can obtain business credit, do you feel like it is good, or kind of people like these IG influencers be like, oh, you can get this and this amount, and you do this and you do this, and it's kind of like, now your brand new business, you're not making any money. Now you got to use like your personal funds to
Yeah.
pay off business credit. I mean, I'm kind of doing that now a little bit, but just,
Yeah.
well, what would be the best to help private practice folks?
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question. And especially for folks that are early on in building practices and incurring a lot of expenses up front, and it's not as accessible for folks as otherwise. What's a good framework of thinking for that? I think everybody's risk tolerance is different,
Hmm.
transparently, on
Yeah.
how they want to accrue additional debt or take on additional loans. And like a majority of clinicians do have a substantial amount of student loans, and that's uh, a big thing to weigh in the back of your mind as well. And so I want to caveat that I'm not a wealth manager or
Right.
an investment fiduciary, but I did work for one for an extended period of time. And I think that framework might be helpful that they provided me once upon a time is uh, when you're thinking about making investments versus taking on additional capital, whatever you might be doing, um, look at the interest rate that's associated with the credit card, whether it's an APR or whether it's a student loan or whether it's an SBA loan or wherever that credit facility might be coming from. And then you look at the opportunity on the other side of making an investment, putting money in the stock market, or putting money in index funds or putting money in a high interest yield savings account. And you can start to look at the balance between the interest rates of what is the amount that I'm accruing in interest over time and what is the amount that I'm going to owe versus what I'm able to do with this money, whether it's producing cash flow through a private practice, and looking at that difference over time and understanding what the impact of that interest is going to be, and how it's going to enable you to cash flow in your current business, whether that's a service-based business or like you selling books, and other merchandise and running a podcast among many other things that you do.
Yeah.
Or what would it look like if you were to take some of that money and make an investment in the in a forward looking opportunity like the stock market. So I think it's getting an understanding of what your risk tolerance is. So what is the actual risk level of me taking on this additional capital if I'm unable to pay off this capital over time? What is the amount of interest that I'm going to accrue versus the amount of income that I'm going to be able to produce through that? And so finding that differential is the important piece.
Now, have you seen like maybe not necessarily know, people in private practice or maybe in private practice or otherwise that okay they get all this capital on the business side and then they gotta like close shop for lack of a better word and they still had this debt. Do you see like issues with that or have you seen anything that they have to close down and be still gotta pay that business debt off?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the one thing about the kind of solopreneur or the small business entrepreneur where personal finances cross over so closely with business finances and business is personal, personal is business is if you do get in a situation where you're unable to pay back or pay down on the loans that you received or the interest against those loans or the primary amount of that money or the primary principal of that money, you do put yourself in a position where you're potentially at risk. There is some benefit or opportunity of setting up a separate business entity, but even at that point, there's still potential legal risk or kind of murky waters as to who is responsible for that credit facility. The benefit of clinicians, though, is largely folks that are, doing 10 client hours or 15 client hours or 20 client hours. Like most of the clinicians that we work with, unless they're making really meaningful investments on the marketing side and in their professional development, are able to kind of within that first 9 months or 12 months or 15 months as they're scaling up their practice, get to a place of cash flow profitability pretty quickly. And so when you think about the expenses that are relevant to you as you're thinking about those investments that you want to make, think about getting to that place of cash flow profitability before you think about making those other business expenses that may be nice to haves but not need to haves, right? And a different framework could be, maybe you set aside, you have a budget or a plan that you're working against of, I'm hoping to make X amount of money by the end of the year. I think if I see this many clients at this rate over this period of time, I'll be able to make this amount of money. And then you back into, from a budgeting standpoint, okay, well, I have my insurance, my malpractice insurance, I have my practice management software, and then I have all of these other expenses. What is the amount from an investment standpoint that I can make with the amount of money that I'm earning in my practice to make those investments that I want to make, but do it in a reasonable way that's not going to put myself in a financially challenging situation.
You make a great point. It's just um, at the end of the day, like just be careful what you see online, and
Yeah.
always reach out to to a professional or go to her joinher.com to get more info if you have any questions. So no, there's a lot of great tips that you've talked about that's important and like all this stuff is like I wish grad schools, even if it's just like one semester, like a class and
Yeah.
just alone. I mean, a class is not going to do it justice, but at least it'll be something. Like you can't gear us to do private practice. And I said this over and over again on the podcast. You can't gear us to do private practice and not have any business fundamentals to teach us. And it's like especially now that, you know, I don't like to say post COVID because we still people are still dying, like 3,000 over 3,000 people a day that's passing away from COVID. Um, but still, like in this new era where people are still struggling, and now like uh, states are making people like reapply for Medicaid, not it being strict like pre-COVID. A lot of all the pre-COVID post-COVID stuff is ending. So now we're going back to pre-COVID times. You need to recertify for Medicaid, like your whatever your food stamps was at that time is going back to that. So it's like all these emergency state of emergency stuff is ending, and now people are really going to be struggling, and so it's kind of that's why we the unsung heroes to try to help people out, but we need to like in order to do that, like stuff needs to happen. So it's kind of like the domino effect. Like you like we need mental health workers. All right, cancel the student loans.
Yeah.
Give us like some incentive or something that is the gov. There is the government spends all this money, and it's like the least you could do is like cancel the loans. We could use this money to be in our businesses and whatever. And it's like it's just it's just a lot. It's a lot going on, and obviously the grad schools are in cahoots with the ASWB, and like it's all a money grab at the end of the day. But it's like
Your words, your words.
so it's like things need to change. Like
Yeah.
definitely a course like something like in entrepreneurship and social work, and I'm glad many social workers are doing like presentations and conferences about it. So it's slowly like coming around. Hopefully, these schools get it together, and you can't do one and gear us to one without any fundamentals behind it, especially us black people, color, black and brown folks that are in the profession that we to help out our own, we would have been like making so much money for and helping people and businesses be thriving, and we helping people in our community and kind of like really like doing the legwork and instead of working backwards. Like I guess that's the American way. You always got to work backwards to get the end result.
Yeah, man. I always think about how well the privilege, but also how limiting. I mean, even once you get out of a graduate program, whether it's a master's program or a doctoral program, I mean, you have another 2 or 3 years of working in a group practice or a community mental health system, making close to nothing, getting reimbursed close to nothing. And, then by the time you're finally breaking out on your own, you've accrued all of this interest on your student loans. And
Mm-hmm.
it's such a limiting field with reimbursements that don't match the value that's being provided by workers. And I mean, to your point, I mean, it's really exciting to see because we see it a lot with a lot of our customers is, and you being a great example of this as well, is like uh expanding beyond just the kind of like the walls of clinical work as we had historically seen it defined. And this is coming at a time where the tailwinds of the narrative around mental health and the broader community are coming to fruition. And I think clinicians as a whole are recognizing the power that they hold in this relationship, in this dynamic, and that, in a from an economic standpoint, from a supply and demand balance, guess what? There's only a limited supply of providers, and it's due time that we take care of them, and it's due time that we create a world where they can be financially independent and financially successful and be supported in the way that they need to, whether it's with capital to open their practice or, a more effective pathway of supporting them financially through reimbursement. So totally on the same page with you there.
Yeah, even in terms of the reimbursement, with all these different, like each state is different. So obviously there's a difference in terms of
Yeah.
health insurance companies, and I know coming from New York alone, there's like so many different low income insurance companies that are attached to Medicaid, and each one does their own thing. And so in terms of reimbursements and getting advocating for more services and sessions could be just a challenge alone. Forget the reimbursement, just my client needs more services,
Yeah.
needs more sessions, and it's like, why are you fighting fighting this? And it's like is a lot. I did that for a couple of years. It was not. It was interesting. Like I'm glad I learned about it and had to do it and submitting documentation and paperwork. But
Oh,
no, like I'm don't want to do that anymore.
it's no joke. That's no joke.
So so what's the future look like for Herd?
What does the future look like for Herd? That's the $1 million question that keeps me and my co-founder Victoria up at night. I mean, hopefully there's no finish line is the way that I would frame it is our goal is to, continue to, and for the extended period of time that we're, lucky enough to be able to do so, providing additional services to providers and supporting providers and building a community of providers and hopefully putting the work that we're doing behind some meaningful social change around things like reimbursement and the world in which providers live. And so we're all about supporting the independent provider because when you support the independent provider, you're supporting a clinician that's able to work with folks that they're trained to work with. You're supporting them in building a financially independent financial future, and you're supporting them in, reaching a larger audience than they might have otherwise been within a specific system. And so, our goal is to build the additional services and community and support that we can to provide clinicians, and their pathway to independence would be the probably quickest and easiest way to describe it.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Now, other than the going to joinher.com, where could people get more information? Because I know you guys are on Twitter, and I know you guys on LinkedIn, and like if people want to like dive in and really like see what Herd is about, where can people go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a Facebook group that Michael and Brittany, two of our teammates, set up. There's about 500 members in it right now. That's really awesome. A great place to, even if you're not ready to join a herd or sign up for our services, access a community of other like-minded professionals that are going through the same financial experiences that you are, that are probably thinking about the same thing and asking the same questions. Um, Michael and our content team have put together an incredible, backlog is the word that I'll use, of resources and tools and state by state guides on our website at joinherd.com. So I would say leveraging that content, checking out our socials, and joining the community is a great way to get to know more about us, but also just embed yourself more in the financial content and the community around what it means to run a private practice.
Awesome, Andrew. Pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for all that you and your team does. Shout out to Michael.
Shout out to Michael.
Stop harassing us on Twitter about progress notes. No, but seriously, thank you to her. Thank you, Andrew, for everything, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much. I had a blast hanging. I really appreciate you having me.